Yeah, definitely. We did have one question from the audience. Hakeem, I'm going to allow you to talk so you can go ahead and ask your question. You can go ahead and unmute your mic.
All right, everyone. First and foremost, thank you for being here today and hosting this. So my question is, all right, if I'm coming from a different background, like a help desk or forensics background, and trying to land a cyber role, what key points should my resume showcase?
Go ahead, Marissa.
So that's a great question. And I saw that there was already a response, but forensics is a big part of security, right? And I think it's a matter of knowing what part of forensics that you're trying to go down, or are you trying to go down that technical path, like pulling deep memory disks, or are you trying to go more down the investigative legal path? So knowing if forensics is the part of security that you want to go into, then definitely use and highlight some of that information on your resume. And if so, make sure you specify which route that you're trying to go, the legal or the technical side, because both of them are really highly sought after roles. And
Sure.
help desk, right? That's a helpful foundation for really any role that you're going to go into security. Even if you want to go a purely compliance or policy procedure or even behavioral science route, it's helpful to understand the help desk, right? Like understanding the workload of answering those tickets and being able to deal with your end users on a day-to-day basis, because that is going to help you and build a foundation for whatever role you choose in security. It's never going to hurt you. So highlight some of those things, pull out some of the job bullets that you'll see on a posting, but then make sure you list any achievements that are security related. Or even in interviews, make sure that you're able to mention things that, or incidents that you were able to thwart or prevent because of some things that you were able to do as help desk.
That was really good. I was taking some notes there too. Thank you, Marissa.
Can I add
Thank
something
you.
too?
Yes, Kim.
If you have anybody in security at your current company, if you were working somewhere and you're wanting to expand, seek out coworkers and team members. Because if you do have an existing security team, start tapping those folks on the shoulder. See if there's any way, if it doesn't interfere your work, if you can not ghost, but shadow them. But also just get an understanding, get to know them and get an understanding of how they got into security, and see if you can just be a sponge and see if there's a mentoring opportunity, if they're willing to mentor you as well, because they may be able to give you some great advice or guidance, because everybody's journey into security is very, very different. There's not really a one flat answer on how you get into this space.
Definitely agree with that. Thank you, Hakeem, for asking that great question. One of the next areas I want to dive into, because people often say they want to get into cyber, and the first thing they throw up is, well, I heard cyber makes a lot of money. Do you think that cyber is just as an equally lucrative field as anything else? And the second part of that question is probably more loaded. How do you make sure you receive a fair offer in the cyberspace?
Who wants to answer?
Marissa. Go ahead, Marissa.
I'll let Kim go ahead. Go ahead, Kim. I'll go.
I think, yes, there is a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money in this space, but it depends on what you do. Because I know people that have been in the space for 20 years and they know how to do everything, and they make $120,000 a year. And I know people that have been in the space for less than 10 years and they make $500,000. So it is so wide and varied. And, you know, you have to understand HR, recruiters, we all have salary bands that we have to work around. So you have to be mindful is if you get into a range or into a role, and especially with a big company, they have a top, they have a low, medium, and a top. If you come in at the top, it's going to restrict you for getting pay increases. But from a market standpoint,
Yeah.
most security people have a shelf life at every company or every role about 1.5 to maybe 3 years. So people tend to make their moves to make more money, but it also gives them an opportunity also to get to know other spaces and infrastructures and industries as well, which is a plus. So it's a very, very wide open, subject, but it just depends, because I mean, the more hands-on technical you are, the more that you understand secure DevOps. That seems to be a really hot thing, especially on
Yeah.
the compensation side. But those guys and gals get paid a lot of money because they are very, very niche, but they also have a very broad background. Security analysts, they can make some decent money, but again, to everybody, how much is a lot of money? To some people, $50,000 is a lot of money. To other people, $500,000 is a lot of people. So it's all relative. It also depends on the location, so the geo bands that everybody stands in. But I think to a conversation that was made earlier today is, you don't necessarily want to pinpoint you in just giving us a specific number. You want to just say, look, I'd really like to be paid what is in fair market right now in the area, and be okay with giving them a range, but don't sell yourself short. Give yourself value. Have confidence in yourself. Don't be afraid to negotiate. Specifically women. Women are afraid to ask for more money all the time because we don't feel valued. And stop that right now. Just stop it. It's the same thing with minority men too. We all just are afraid to ask for more money because we don't feel like we deserve it. But you know what? If we bring value, if we bring confidence, if we're impacting the business, don't be afraid to ask for more money, but be reasonable too. Not, I make 100,000 and I want 175. That's not reasonable. It's not. But let's just be fair and be open. Have those discussions. Create the rapport with the HR person or the recruiter, and see if they'll reveal. Because once you start having that dialogue, they'll start telling you, look, this is as much as we can pay. And hopefully those, at least I try to do that. Hopefully some of those recruiters that you do work with will reveal that information to you as well.
I definitely have had conversations with a lot of individuals, and not all recruiters reveal it, but I know that now that pay transparency is becoming very relevant due to some laws that are put in place, and more recruiters are calling now, and they give the band up front. So I'm not sure if that's just because of the legalities around making sure people can't ask certain questions around, like, what was your previous salary? What are you looking for? Is what now is asked versus what do you currently make? So yeah, what other tools to add on to that, when they ask you those questions, like, what are you making now? What are some ways that you can counteract that response or that question, Marissa?
So some tools use Blind is a cool app where you actually have to have a verified work email address to say that you work for a specific company, and people show up anonymously to basically say, this is what I'm making, I work at this company. So if you do get an offer, you can go on that app and just click into the company, and all of the people who work there that are willing to share their comp information will show you. So you can see if you're getting a comparable offer. But there are other things like Glassdoor and Indeed, Kununu. I think there's another app that came out
Pay
recently.
scale.
So I don't like PayScale. I have evaluated every single compensation tool under the sun, and there is absolutely zero that have something consistent for cybersecurity. So when you're trying to build job descriptions, they might have one or two words. It's network security, cybersecurity, and sometimes risk, right? But risk assessment can go towards so many different jobs. And that doesn't necessarily say that someone from, let's say, forensics is going to have the same increase, whereas they program that tool to give you the same adjustment for that particular word added to a job description. So
Yeah.
it's more holistic. It's more about the company's philosophy on how they value the role. And while there might be some pay bands, like Kim mentioned, In the companies that I worked for, it's more about the talent that we're finding. So if the pay band is, let's say, 100 to 120,000, but we're interviewing someone and they're just blowing the interviews out of the water, we see that their future could be something that will add a whole lot more value to the business, then we're going to go up to 130, 140 if that's what we need to do to get this person on the team. It just really depends, right? And then that becomes an HR thing to discuss, like pay equity and all that. But when it comes to determining if your offer is fair, I think that's a really personal question. So my tagline on LinkedIn is a quote from Confucius that says, when you find a career that you love, you'll never work another job again in your life. So I say find what it is that you're passionate about in security. And when you know what that purpose is, then go after it. And even though you know what you need to make in order to live a comfortable lifestyle, be a little flexible if you're, let's say, starting off and it's your first job, right? Like if you have just an education, chances are you're not going to get the $500,000 check that Kim was talking about. So be somewhat realistic in that sense so you can verify if the offer is fair, but also know that there is more to just work than that extra $5,000 to $10,000 that you're looking for. Find your purpose, find your satisfaction, and make sure that it fits with your story. And on the aspect of negotiating, I'm a really transparent recruiter too. So if we tell you that the range at the beginning of the conversation is XYZ, and don't wait till the end when you think you're going to get an offer to negotiate. That's your opportunity to say, great, well, this is my absolute bottom dollar, but this is my salary. So I would not accept an offer lower than this. And that has to be a real number for you. And then say, but this is where really I'd like to be based on the conversation that we had and the understanding I have of the role. So you are giving your recruiter range versus us giving you the range. So we know whether it's even worth you investing time to see if it's a match for both of us, because it's not a one-way conversation.
Thank you. I definitely agree with that. I've referred a lot of people to different companies, different consulting companies, and there is so much inconsistency in recruiting and how the recruiters connect with the prospective candidate that I've been so grateful to experience what is needed, but you're dropping some gems. Both of you are dropping some gems. And I think definitely leveraging those apps, Blind and Glassdoor. One of the things I have noticed, like you said, basically, you want to make sure you're comparing yourself against other individuals with the same titles, same role, versus just general titles, which I have noticed that when you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah. But TJ, when I wanted to ask you, so when looking for candidates, definitely entry level, what is actually the price tag of a certification? How do they look at a candidate and say, we want this candidate and we're going to pay a little bit more because they have X certification? Or are they saying, we want this candidate because they have this certification in general? And does it help with what Marissa said, negotiations, getting more salary? Definitely want to tap into that because there's been so much conversation today around what certification should I get? What will make me stand out? What will make me get more money?
Sure. Yeah. So I I think it depends on, who you're speaking to, right? I mean, if you're speaking to, let's just say, no pun intended, but Attainium, right? Certifications may go a long way. No pun intended, Marissa. I'm just I'm saying that in the whole scheme of things, for you to have a certification may allow a person from that type of company to know that you have a basic understanding of being an ethical hacker or whatever certification you're going for, right? Me working for a small business, I definitely will pick certifications before anything else. I look at certifications first, then I look at education. but that's just me.
Wow.
Okay. So, you know, for someone wanting to come and knowing that, you know, I like to offer opportunities for people that at an entry level, you know, even if they're pursuing their certification means a lot to me, right? And obviously, I mean, as recruiters, I'm sure Kim and Marissa could agree with this. We all have a, you know, somewhat of a good judge of character, right? If you're able to speak on what you've done, what you're learning, and where you want to be, it'll come out in your conversation, right? So, you know, have I ever hired someone with no certification? Absolutely. But to the eye, right? And that's what you look like on paper. You know, if you ask me, do certifications really help? I think they would. Again, just depending on who you're talking to, whether you completed the certification or pursuing it. You know, to me, for you to even put yourself in that realm of accountability, you know, lets me know that you plan to go somewhere, right? Now, you know, who do we know if, you know, if you're really pursuing it, right? I get it. I think it comes to the point of saying, you know, understand where you are with cybersecurity and what you'd like to do. Sure, we can do a number of things from digital forensics, blue team, red team, you know, but, you know, getting a good grasp as to, you know, what challenges you, what keeps you going, right? Technology changes, right? So should we. And that's kind of how I look at it. So, you know, if you are looking to progress and get in even at an entry level, you know, if you are really pursuing these certifications, you know, that'd be always to me, a great thing to know. But again, you know, I am transparent enough to say that, you know, if you're not really pursuing it, hopefully you have some other interest that you do in your pastime to prove, you know, your initial interest in cybersecurity or that aspect of it per se.
Thank you, TJ. Marissa, what do you have to add?
So I mentioned that in my beginning or early recruiting career, I did work for a government contractor. And so for the companies that I've worked for outside of that, really degrees and certifications absolutely did not matter. And I think it really varies based on industry. If you're talking about going into healthcare, government, or higher education, those are industries that are very security certification heavy because they need something to fall back on to say that this person is accredited in doing what they do. Because let's say in the government contracting world, they're placing these requirements into the verbiage of the contract. So if a contractor hires someone that doesn't meet those qualifications, then they are actually dinged and potentially fined for non-compliance. So, you know, they are our OCR, if you will, and we don't want to get hit with dings. And the last thing you want as a recruiter is for it to come back on you. Well, why'd you put this person forward if you knew it was going to hurt us, right? That data business case. So there, I think that's important to take into account the industry that you want to go into. If you're coming out of the military, a lot of times they'll pay for your education. So take a look at that training budget. But for other companies or outside of those industries, then, you know, they should have somewhat of a training budget, even if it's small, to help you get certifications if you feel that is the path that you want to take. But as I mentioned, like the companies that I've worked for, certifications and degrees are not required. It's all around, do you have the skills and not just the aptitude, but the desire to continuously improve. It's that curious mindset. And is this what you actually want to do long term? Or is it like we had discussed before? Are you just here for the paycheck? You're going to clock out at 5 and just not think about it. Oh, by the way, there's an incident tonight and you're just going to sleep. Like those are things that we want to know. And if you're here just for a paycheck, those things do show up in your performance. So certifications for specific industries can be important and sometimes required, but for, you know, the rest of the companies that I've worked for, they don't make a difference at all. It's about how good can you perform on the job, what kind of experience or extracurricular experience do you have, and what are we willing to do to invest in you if that certification is really important to us.
Thanks, Marissa. Kim, I wanted to also ask, definitely taking into account, the certifications, it changes by industry. When a entry level individual is looking at what industry they want to go to, what fields they want to be in, they run into the catch 22 is of you don't have the experience, so we can't hire you. Well, if I don't get hired, I never get the experience. So if they're looking to go into healthcare, finance, IT, government, how do they get transferable experience, or what role should they look at to help them get transferable experience?
Well, oops. Ooh, that was bad. Okay. Is there an echo now? Okay, sorry about that, guys. Well, it really depends because, like I said earlier, I think everybody's career path is different. And I talk to a lot of people that have been in one industry and they're trying to get into another. I think, depending on where you are in your career, again, if you can attach yourself to somebody internally that is in the actual space to see if you can shadow them. But I would also start getting involved and start learning about the space. First and foremost, cybersecurity is really deep and wide. So you got to understand, which part of the industry really interests you, and then start learning about it. There's so many YouTube, and again, use YouTube as your free university along with Google. Again, that was mentioned earlier today. But also, figure out who the thought leaders are in the space, understand what's trending in that specific part of cyber, and follow those people. And then look at your community, get on Meetup, it's meetup.com, and start looking at who's networking where in your community, because most of those meetup groups, especially if you live in a larger city, they meet somewhere once a month outside of the COVID thing, but they're doing it online. So even now, me being in Dallas, I can attend the OWASP meetup group in New York online. So now this is a great opportunity because these people are having these meetups online. Now you can go into any community and actually sit in with any of these groups across the country. All you need to do is just enter in, just become a member. And sit in on those. The other thing too is once the COVID, again, once we start opening back up and somewhat, life goes back to normal, these conferences come to town. Find out when these conferences are coming into town and see how you can volunteer. Again, you've got to really do your due diligence. It's going to be a lot of work to get into the space, because as much as I love this space, it is a challenge being a recruiter trying to help all of these people that want to get into the space. And, I've sat in on conversations of how do we get the next gen? How do we deal with it? Because most of these companies are not equipped to train on the job. They want someone that can come in and do it. So learn about, whatever part of cyber you want to get into, start learning about it and see how you get some hands-on experience. And when I say hands-on, I mean in your lab at home. Because getting a cert is fantastic. I think, sometimes it gets to be that it's really expensive wallpaper, but it does give an employer an indicator that you have the aptitude to start something and learn and finish it. So it does bring value, and you are going to have to get a cert to get through the the gatekeeper, which is usually the recruiter or the hiring manager sometimes. So you have to really look at, what that cert is. And again, like we said earlier, put it down on your resume that you're pursuing it. But get involved in the community, start meeting with people. When you volunteer at these conferences, now people are going to actually come up to you. And then if you attend a conference and you're attending, get a t-shirt printed up and says, I'm looking for a job. Do you know how many people are going to come up to you and say, what kind of job are you wanting to do in cyber? You're actually asking people to come talk to me. And it is the cheapest marketing campaign and branding that you can do for yourself. So you've got to think of creative ways of how can I get into space. But and to the point of people don't want, or they feel uncomfortable connecting with folks on LinkedIn, again, look at these people that are in these industries, thought leaders, and do a reverse search and a reverse engineering on their LinkedIn profile. How did they get in the space, and how can you emulate that? and send a personal message to people that you want to, you know, connect to, because I send a personal message to almost everybody that I connect to, and I make it personal to them. You know, I hope you don't mind the connection requests. I'm actually a student. I'm looking to get into space. Love your background. Would you be open to having a conversation? Because people right now are stuck at home. They're talking to people. They're talking to total strangers. I've had so many fantastic conversations with people that would have never given me the time 6 months ago because they have time to talk to me. I mean, I had a CISO talk me off the ledge a couple of days ago through LinkedIn messaging because I was having a bad day. And this is how awesome our community is. I've been connected with him for a year, never talked to him, but he sent me something. We started engaging. He was like, well, Kim, what's the problem? So again, we're people. So just don't be afraid to approach us. I mean, all of you guys can connect with me. I'm happy to talk to all of you guys. If you know, have a one-on-one, can't do it all in 1 week. But again, I've got the time right now that I can have one-on-ones with you folks. I mean, I had somebody that reached out earlier this week that couldn't get into the panel, and I had a one-on-one session with them. So again, don't be afraid to ask for help. Okay, so just utilize your network. Put on your LinkedIn something really funny, you know, use it as your branding tool, a little bit about you, and put everything that you're doing that's relevant to the space that you want to get into.